Alright, hi everybody. This is week 3 of web server development, ASP.NET MVC 4. This video is going to cover chapter 5 of the textbook, which really is just covering the ideas of working with the Razor engine. The Razor engine is something that was introduced alongside the MVC framework for Microsoft, and it's essentially a slightly different way of approaching markup within your web pages. If you're familiar at all with web form development, you're probably familiar with the concept of a web control. That's basically where they try to abstract away all of the concepts of the actual HTML, and they give you more of this rapid development environment that gives you drag and drop controls with properties and settings and events. So that's kind of a complete opposite paradigm to what Razor is trying to give you. If you've ever done any sort of classic ASP development or PHP development, you are probably more familiar with the inline markup that you would see alongside some HTML for a web page. Razor provides that same type of functionality, but it's much leaner, much more efficient, and provides you a lot more flexibility than what you would have seen in a PHP or even a classic ASP type environment. So I'm going to take the project from hour 4. I've extended it just slightly, and I'm going to go ahead and utilize this project again for the chapter 5 hour. So if you're following along and you're wanting to look at that, or if you're looking for a baseline, is how do we get to where we are, look back at the chapter 4 video, which is hour 1 for this week 3. Alright, so what I did is I took the item class and I added a few additional properties. I'm trying to parallel the chapter 5 example just for some consistency, but I may deviate. So we have we have an item. The item has a product ID, name, description, category, and price. Properties, I've gone ahead and initialized those. I've created one item called my item. I'm inside of my home controller, my index action, so that's kind of the default. And what I've then done is I've taken my item and I'm actually passing it to the view result. So the idea here is that I'm creating this item and then I'm sending the item off to my view. And as we go through this, you're going to see how we can go through and we can create these items. We can then strongly type our views so that they understand that the data coming from the controller to the view is a particular model or a particular class, and then interacting with that strongly typed view and actually getting the information out of the model object that was passed from the controller to the view. Alright, so from this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a view. So I'm going to right click inside of this method, this action method, and I'm going to say add view. So Visual Studio is going to take from the action name, the method name, and say, okay, you need a view called index. It's going to use the Razor view engine, and then I'm going to check this box here to create a strongly typed view. And then from here I'm going to choose a model class, an item. Now, as I was preparing for this, I actually went in here, clicked the checkbox for a strongly typed view, dropped down on model class, and this list was empty. The reason this list was empty is that this list is generated not by Visual Studio's looking through all of the .cs files, but rather it's looking at the compiled DLL that exists inside of the bin directory for this project. So what that means is at any point if you drop down on a model class list and you don't see the class you're looking for, what you need to do is cancel, go back, and then go to the build menu and do a build solution. And assuming you don't have any compiler errors, it'll build the DLL for your project. You can then go back, add view again, create strongly typed, and then you should be able to see the class that you're looking for. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and leave the scaffolding template at empty, and leave all the rest of the options kind of at their default. We're actually going to uncheck to use a layout or master page as well. We're going to touch on that a little later. So we'll go ahead and do an add, and you'll see what happens is that Visual Studio creates for us kind of a templated view. At the very top you'll see where it says @model, and then it says MVC week 3, which is my project and my namespace, .models.item. So this line is what makes this view strongly typed. This line actually is saying that the model that is going to be applied to this view, and if you remember you can only have one model applied to a view, this model is MVC week 3.models.item. Item is the class. So that's basically strongly typed this view, it's bound this view to that model, and from this point we can actually go ahead and begin to reference the model object that was passed to this view. Now, accessing the model data is actually very simple, and the Razor engine also provides a lot of this functionality through it and its counterparts with the ASP.NET framework. So to access the model, we'll simply use the @ symbol, and that is kind of the trigger for the Razor engine to say, hey, we're going to put some C# or VB.NET code into this page. So you start your line with an @ symbol, and then you're going to call the model property, and this model property is a property of this page. So if you notice in the pop-up it says web view page item. It's kind of a generic, it says .model. So the model property is an instance, that the instance that was passed from the controller to this view, and it's an instance of an item. So we can say model dot, and they have access to all of the properties of our item model. So I'm going to say name. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. I'm going to do a start of Google Chrome. And what we'll get out is the name property for our item. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that, stop, and I'm going to jump back into item, and I want to show you what it's actually pulling is our name property was overwritten in our last example, so it's actually pulling product ID, concatenating it with a colon, and then concatenating it with the name. I'm going to simplify this and just back it up to name so we have consistency. I'm going to do an F6 to recompile, and then I'll just do an F5 which will reload the page. So we now have the name of the item that was sent from the home controller, the kayak. We sent it to the view. The view then picks it up and then outputs from the model, the item, the name property. So there's no need for equal signs or anything complex. It's simply @ and then a model.name. With Visual Studio's help, this is actually very smart. So if we do model and we come up with something else called favorites, Visual Studios will actually identify that favorites is not a real property, and it's going to give you, just as you would in your C# code, it's going to give you a little red squiggly with a warning saying that favorites is not a property or member of the item class. So very simplistically, that's interacting or interfacing with model data. So again, from your controller, you'll do some logic of packaging and packing up information that needs to be sent to the view. Once that information is packaged up inside of a model, you would then send that model as a parameter to the view when you say return view. And then that data is accessible from the view using the model property. Now, let's say that we want to have a kind of a shifting gears and looking at layouts and design. There is this section of code above that talks about layout equals null. What that is that that's a declaration that this page, in this case, is not inheriting a MVC4 layout page. It's actually just rendering straight HTML right off the bat. There is no layout page incorporated or involved in this, and that it's very simplistic and very direct. There is the ability, however, to create what are called layout pages. Again, if you're familiar with ASP.NET web forms, you have what are called master pages, which provides consistency and layout and kind of a master template or theming for your site. These layouts provide you the same functionality, and they're slightly bit more flexible because you can easily define a different layout per view. So if you have a particular layout for a certain type of view, like all of your edit views have a particular layout, or all of your index views or listing views have a particular layout, you can actually have differing layouts depending on the view that's being rendered. So to add those, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our views folder. We are going to choose add, oops, sorry about that. Going to choose add new item. And then what we're looking for is the MVC for layout page razor. And what I'm going to do is rename this to be underscore basic layout. Enter. And what that's going to do for us is it's going to generate a underscore basic layout 1.cshtml. So this file, if you look at it side by side, you'll notice there's a fair bit of similarity. There is no model at the top of the declaration. There is no layout declaration. It starts with a doc type. But then after that, you have specific razor components that seem a little different than what we were seeing when we were doing single pages. So to start off with, we have the title, and it says viewbag.title, and we'll talk about the viewbag and the title in a little bit. And then we have render body. So what this render body is it's kind of it's a method, but it functions more like a placeholder, if you want to think of it in those terms for now, that says this is the spot where you want to render out the body. So to have our view reference our layout, we'll start by establishing layout details here. So we're going to put in here viewbag.title equals product name, and then we're going to reference the actual layout by putting in tilde/views, and the tilde references the root of the website, and the ASP.NET engine knows how to interpret that and resolve that for us. And so we'll do tilde/views/underscore basic layout 1.cshtml. So that will be our page, and that's our page then referencing our layout. So we'll save that. And then on basic layout 1, we're going to just add some additional markup here to show that we're using the layout. And we'll save that as well. Now let me just kind of touch on this real fast. Viewbag is a dynamic variable. It's something that's kind of unique in that it is an object that dynamically is able to gain and set properties. If you're familiar with the idea of a dictionary or a key value pair, the dynamic type basically functions in that way. So when you do, in this case, viewbag is the dynamic, and you do viewbag.title, title becomes the key, and then whatever you're setting title equal to becomes the value. Sometimes you'll see things referenced more like this. That is a basic equivalent. Under the hood, the dynamic is actually doing this work, but the compiler, along with the runtime, is able to kind of give you this more, if you want to think of it as natural feel for a program. So you have this dot notation instead of the curly brackets with the quotes and everything. So it's doing kind of this pseudo shifting of data. Well, the view bag, you can store just about anything in there. You could say view bag dot, you can call applesauce equals fuzzy bunny, and it'll accept it. It'll just basically create a pseudo property called applesauce and set the value of it equal to fuzzy bunny. It's very flexible in that sense. And you also have access to the view bag from your controller. So you can come in here and say view bag, and there's a view bag property, and you can say applesauce equals fuzzy bunny. And that just works. And then that same applesauce property, we can see it when we get over here, and I'll just go ahead and do this. We'll do view bag applesauce. Simple as that. So we'll have that applesauce output coming alongside our product name. So we'll save that. Alright, so from here we have viewbag.title. So we're pulling the title that's being defined up here on the index view. And then we're putting in an h1 tag, a div tag, and then we're saying render the body inside of this div tag. So we'll save, do an F6 to recompile, and a refresh, and there we go. So there's our product information, there's the product name, and then the word fuzzy bunny, which is coming from our view bag. So any changes that we want to make to the layout itself, we can actually do that in here. We can do an H2 that says hello world. Do a refresh again, and there's our hello world. If I want to put a line break between kayak and fuzzy bunny, I'll come in here and do a /vr tag, refresh again, and there's our break. So you have a lot of this flexibility around content and how content appears and how it works and interacts. So you have a lot of options, and it's all it's simplistic in the sense that, you know, it's not anything fancy. There's not controls or things that you need to manage. It's simply a matter of it's HTML and a little bit of C# to kind of glue it all together to give you that richness that you need in a framework. Alright, so you can go through and we can set up additional views, and we can use that same layout over and over again. So if we were to go back into our home controller, we can add another action. Call it peas and carrots, and we'll say return view another item. So we'll say var another item equals new item. And we'll say the name equals cheese crackers. Okay. So we'll right click, say add view. It'll be referencing item again, and then I'm going to choose the box here that says use a layout or master page, and then I'm going to grab basic layout 1 again and click add. So what Visual Studios did for us this time is it brought in layout and pointed to basic layout 1, and then brought in the method name, peas and carrots, and treated that as our title. So again, from here we can say model.name, hit save, we'll recompile, return to the page, and then we should be able to go peas, carrots, home, peas, carrots. There you go. So if we kind of look at the way this is all falling together, what's happening here is that we have our layout has an H1 product information, an H2 of hello world, and then we have this div tag, which is setting a padding of 20, font size of 20 points. Inside of that, we're rendering the rest of the view. So the rest of the view is an H2 tag, which is coming out with peas, carrots, which is this, and then model.name, which for this particular action is cheese crackers. So as we're interacting with our data, we have a lot of additional functionality with the Razor engine and how we can do simplistic logic and how we can set attributes and things like that within our web pages. So I'm going to go ahead and close this browser window. I'm going to go ahead and close the peas, carrots page, and I'm going to close basic layout. So I'm going to go back to my home controller. So we have in here view bag applesauce equals fuzzy bunny. I'm going to go ahead and drop that, and I'm going to replace it with view bag dot in stock. I'm going to set that equal to true. Then from the index page, I'm going to do product name colon, and that'll be the name of our product. And then I'm going to put in here div data product ID equals, and then I can do model dot product ID. I'm going to do model dot price. So the Razor engine is very smart and very adaptive in that it recognizes attributes and quotes around attributes, and it knows that this entire line here of data-product ID is not C#, but when I start at the ampersand, or I'm sorry, the @ sign, that model.product ID is code, is C#, and then the quotes and the closing bracket are not, and then it picks back up again and says, oh, okay, model.price is also C#. So you have a lot of little interesting elements that can go on here to make things work. Another thing that we can do is we could come down new line, and we could do @ sign switch. We could say view bag dot. I have to jump back here and say in stock. And we can actually use curly braces for the switch statement. And we can say case true. You can say in stock. Now to put the words in stock in here, it is not going to take them because it's not quite sure how to handle them. If I put them in stock like this, it will take them, but it does not render out appropriately. It doesn't know what to do with that. So to get some text in here, we're going to do @ sign colon, and using the colon after the @ sign is actually a more explicit notation, and we can say in stock, and we can say case false colon. But then if we actually put some markup in here, we can say out of stock. So because there's actually markup there, the Razor engine knows that this is markup that should be output to the user, where if we're just typing in some text, it struggles with understanding our intention. So putting that colon there is it helps explicitize it. It says we explicitly want to have this go out to the user. And then we can put another break. Let's double check here. Okay. So what's happening here is we're getting a quote-unquote compile error, and it's saying that the switch expression or case label must be a bool, char, string, integral, enum, or corresponding nullable type. So what's happening here is that it doesn't the Razor engine and the C# compiler can't figure out, because this is a dynamic, it can't figure out what in stock is. It doesn't know if it's a boolean or a string or a class of some sort, so we need to do an explicit cast to bool. So that says that the in stock property from the view bag is a boolean. Okay? So that gives us that ability to force that kind of logic there. So let's go ahead and save, and then we'll do F5 to compile and run. And what we get back is product name kayak, and that's actually a price, and it is in stock. If I come back and I say that it is false, we stop, false, save. I'm going to F6 just to recompile without redeploying, and then I'll refresh my page. It is now out of stock. So there's how we can have some logic around data that's being sent to the view, either via the view bag or via the model, and then being able to do some logic around how do we handle this data. A third option that you can also use if you're running into cases where the Razor engine isn't quite picking up what you're trying to put in, I was going to say what you're putting down, is you can put it in parentheses. We can say model dot price, and we can say string dot format. It's a currency notation, and that will help the render engine to understand what we're actually trying to accomplish. So we save and refresh. We then get our data. Now you'll notice that in parentheses there, it actually picked it up and wrote it out that way. So we didn't need the parentheses for that. It's actually smart to say, oh, these are text. These aren't part of the statement. If you wanted to actually have those parentheses in there, though, there's a few ways to accomplish that. We could set it up in such a way, if you were to move those parentheses inside of the @ symbol, then they would be picked up as part of the expression and not just as text. So the last thing that we're going to cover is just utilizing iteration within your views. So if we'll jump back to our home controller, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to replace it with item array inventory equals item repository dot available items. And that's going to return to me an array of items, which is what I'm wanting in this case. And then what I plan to do is, we don't need the view bag anymore, I'm going to send inventory to our view. Now because I've changed it from a single item to an array of items, I need to go into the item.cshtml file and change our model declaration in here, otherwise we'll get a model mismatch. So now we're dealing with an array of models, or array of items in our model. So to present all of those, what we'll want to do is inside of this div, we'll want to probably put out a table of data. So we'll start out with a table tag, tr, and then the tr will have two TDs inside. And the first TD will be our, it would be model.name, but we're dealing with an array, so we'll have to make some adjustments to that, and then we'll have model.price. And again, this will be a string format, C0C. That'll be our end goal. Alright. So each row is going to represent one item in the array. So we'll set up a table header. And inside of here, we'll have name and price. And then we'll do an @ sign, and we'll do a for each. We're going to say for each item. And I'm going to use the accelerator and bring in the full path to the class for item. So we'll say each item I in model. And then inside of the body of this for each loop will be our TRs. And now every instance of the item is going to be called I. So we're going to change it from model here to I. So I is our single item out of the item array. So it'll be I.name, I.price, and if I click here after the dot, do a control space bar, the IntelliSense agrees with me that I is an item. So I can save that. I can do an F5. And what I now have is product information, hello world, both coming from the layout, and then I have name and price, so orange, apple, grapes, pear. If I come back to my project, stop, go into my item repository, I have item 1, which is an orange. There's item 1, and then orange, apple, grapes, pear. So if I change this to be 90 cents, I'll call it orange 2, F6 to recompile, jump back to the page, refresh. I now have that reflected in my table. So you have a lot of functionality within the Razor engine, that ability to bring pretty much just about any C# code, loops, conditionals. You can even do variable declaration within the Razor side of your MVC app, and it just gives you a lot of control over that data and how it's rendered out into the page. So the idea here is you have a controller, you have an action, you have a model, you have a class basically that's inside of that action that you want to send to the view. So the trick is that you take that data that you want the view to render and you package it up inside of a model. And I mentioned a little bit before about this idea of a view model, and that concept still holds true. You may end up finding that you need to build specialized models for particular views because there's such a large amount of complex data that needs to be sent over that you don't have the ability to send multiple models. You have one model to work with, but that model can be very complex. It can have a property that represents all of the inventory, and it represents that property for a customer, and it represents the order, and all of that is wrapped inside of a single model that may be like order status or customer status. So having something as rich or complex as that type of a model or class is what you may end up finding yourself needing to build when you have to present so much information on a given view. Alright, so that is the basics of the Razor engine, how you use it, what you can do with it, and what the potential is for your for what you're doing. Check Blackboard. There will be an assignment. The assignment will basically be, I want you to go through and build your own model, build a controller, create an action, and then load up that model with some data, just as we've done here today, and then present that data in a usable way in the view page. So I just wanted you to kind of work through and practice through those concepts of taking data from point A to point B and getting a feel for that flow. So that will be the homework assignment for this week. Again, I'll have it up on Blackboard, so I want you to review it and then do it, and you'll have until the end of our next class period to submit. So if you do have questions, feel free to email me and ask, or feel free to just ask during class at the end of class. We usually have about an hour left. So thanks, have a great week.